You likely don't know me, so I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Rhonda Gonzales. I'm the rather new dean for the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences, closing out my third month here on campus. I'm so happy to see all of our staff and faculty, and especially our students here today. Haven't had too many weeks of seeing you all on campus, but looking forward to many more weeks to come through the academic year. And it's such a pleasure to see you all here today. I just want to mention the proud reality that is the collaboration between media, film, and journalism studies on this campus, along with IRISE. I know this is the reason many of you have found your way to this event, is a connection through media, film, and journalism studies and IRISE, our Interdisciplinary Research Institute for the Study of Inequalities, a very apropos institute to be working on this topic with us today in this series. As you likely all realize and know, journalism, it plays a very strong and important contemporary role in social movements, activism in our present times. And while we have new technologies and modalities of communication, as a historian, I must say that the use of journalism in radio and print and in other material ways has been an important source of communicating what people expect and want in their societies and for their futures. So I'm really excited to see so many of you invested, including our panelists, in thinking about the role that journalism plays. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Lynn Schofield-Clark, Professor and Chair of the Department of Media, Film, and Journalism Studies and Director of the Estlow Center for Journalism and New Media. Professor Clark is a media scholar who researches how young people from Black, Brown, and Asian communities get information about the communities they live in, and how some young people then bring about change in their communities by using media and storytelling in innovative and powerful ways, just as our guest speakers do. She's worked with the team closely to choose today's speakers because the speakers exemplify how young people can use media as one aspect of a toolkit when they're working to make positive difference in their communities. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Schofield-Clark.
Thank you so much, Dean Gonzales, for the welcome, and welcome to all of you here. Thanks so much for being here. I know that we have several classes here, and I want to recognize them. But first, I want to start our afternoon with a land acknowledgement, just acknowledging where we're holding today's events. As many of you know, the University of Denver is located on lands that are held in stewardship by the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute tribes. And it's with gratitude that we can recognize the descendants of those communities, of the Northern Cheyenne, Montana, the Northern Arapaho of Wyoming, and the Southern Cheyenne of Arapaho of Oklahoma. And we remember that it's through their sacrifices that we are able to engage in learning in this land. I also want to recognize that I'm a person who grew up and benefited from settler culture. Specifically, as some of my own ancestors settled on the Lenape lands that are now in the area that we know of as New York City, which is where our guests are from. And they came in the 17th century, which was not long after one of the largest massacres of indigenous tribes in US history. So I recognize that my fate is and has long been tied to the indigenous people of this land. And it's out of that recognition that I want to encourage all of us here to come to the university and to other institutions with the expectation that our institutions will show respect and support to the descendants of the Cheyenne and the Arapaho by offering indigenous scholarships and other forms of support. And I know that this is really a key issue right now. Some of you know that some of our indigenous students were harassed at an activities fair at the beginning of the school year by another student group. And so I think it's very important for us to ask DU as a university, as an institution, to quickly ensure that our Native students feel welcomed here and feel supported. And so one of the things that we want to do today is to talk about the ways that different groups can come together and can be supportive of each other across difference and when there are challenges that we face together and separately. So I want to start again by welcoming our 2 o'clock classes. We have several of them. The first one that I want to welcome is Professor Ethel Swartley's class, Welcoming the Stranger, Hospitality, Culture, Language, and Migration. And the first person who raises their hand from that class will get a free t-shirt. Oh, look at all those hands. Okay. I saw your Okay, I'll get some more to you in a minute. Okay. How about in Professor Linda Olson's inclusive leadership class? Woohoo! Someone wants a t-shirt. All right. We do have different size t-shirts, so you may need to find the others who won if this is not the size. So, others from the inclusive leadership class? There you go. Have a few. Okay, how about Professor Efley Brooks's class? Whoa! Oh my gosh, I didn't even see who got the first one.
Right here.
Okay. Okay, and then how about the class that I am co-teaching with Soul? Hip hop as medicine. All right, so you can.
That one right there was pretty fast.
All right. Who else did you see? There you go. Here, you can have one of those. We have a few more t-shirts around too, so there you go. Yeah. All right. And one last class. Oh my God. Allison Baird's class, The Psychology of Diversity. I saw a hand back here. Who'd you see, Shaina? All right. I saw one back here.
No love at all.
It was good. Okay. We do have more shirts and more free stuff to hand out, so we'll be getting to that in a minute. Today, we have 3 guest lecturers here, thanks to the support of several key groups that are associated with the University of Denver. The Estlow family, the Margolin family, and a family that we call the Department of Media, Film, and Journalism Studies at the University of Denver. So I want to tell you a little bit about these lectures. The Margolin lecture had its beginnings in 1979, and the Estlow lecture started in 1993. And the Media, Film, and Journalism Studies lecture is new this year. In each of these awards are made in recognition of the legacy of the people who are really remarkable and have made contributions to the university and to Denver at large. So Morton Margolin, whose picture's up there now, was a lifelong journalist who reported on business and economics for 35 years. He was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize when he produced a series of news stories in 1952 that exposed controversial US reclamation projects in central Wyoming in the area of Riverton, which is home to the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes. Margolin highlighted the fact that business interests were influencing government decisions. Debates about sovereignty in the area raged on for years and still do, in part because of Margolin's reporting. So I'm pleased that we were able to have several members of the Margolin family here for the morning class and some who are with us in the webinar. So thanks for being with us. And thanks to the family for continuing to support excellence in journalism as we remember the legacy of your father. Given Margolin's longstanding research that held those in power accountable for their treatment of indigenous peoples and lands, we're pleased this year to recognize Andrea Alejandra Gonzales as the Margolin Distinguished Lecturer. Andrea identifies herself as a queer mestiza abolitionist activist who embraces her indigenous and Latina heritage and has used her voice and her platforms first as operations manager with Youth Informed Organization Youth Over Guns, and now as an educator with New Yorkers Against Gun Violence to support and educate young people about race, racism, gun violence, and the need for alternatives to today's inequitable systems. And it's a pleasure to recognize Andrea as a young person who's shaping conversations about accountability, just like Morton Margolin did through journalism in his lifetime. So please join me in welcoming Andrea Alejandra. Andrea received an award earlier, and today this afternoon we're going to recognize our second lecturer, which is in the Estlow lecture. This is a picture of Ed and Charlotte and Ed Estlow, and the award was created in their honor. Ed graduated from the University of Denver in 1942. He actually played on the football team. Did you know that the DU had a football team? I don't know. And he still holds the longest running back record for DU's football history. And he likes to say that he got on the board of trustees specifically so he could make sure that we never had another football team so that he could hold that record. But he graduated from DU in 1942 and went on to work as a reporter and then a publisher. And finally, he was CEO of the Scripps newspaper company. And then from that position, he oversaw a long tradition of news that held power to account and supported interests of all people. Ed served as a member of the Board of Trustees and then chair beginning in 1976. And after he left the board, he continued to serve in an advisory role for DU's financial committee and remained a loyal member of the DU community throughout his lifetime. And Ed was someone that I was fortunate to be able to know personally and considered a mentor. He was someone who always treated others with respect, and he had a wonderful sense of humor and was a delightful person. And several members of Ed Estlow's family will be joining us today. And today here is his daughter, Nancy Gwynn, who can maybe wave her hand so we can all recognize her. Thank you, Nancy, and other members of the Estlow family who may be watching us for your continued commitment to journalism, to the University of Denver, and to these kinds of conversations. So we really appreciate your contributions and your commitment. And we thank you for the enthusiastic involvement that the family has had over the years. And we're pleased now today to be able to honor Shaina Harrison as this year's Estlow Lecturer and Anvil of Freedom Award recipient. Shaina is also a delightful person with an amazing sense of humor who Ed would have loved. And what she does with her work, she started as an activist when she was 15 years old. She created a program that's called the Reaction Curriculum Program that's been used in thousands of schools and classes throughout New York City area and other places around the country as well. What she does is work with young people, amplifying their stories to bring about policy changes in the criminal justice system in New York. And Shaina is a person who identifies as a mom and as a plus size influencer. She has more than 60,000 Instagram followers on social media. So, so if you don't follow her now, you might want to. So she's got some it's really fun to be able to follow her. And it's wonderful to be able to meet her in person. So, and now I get to actually give you the award because you are the Here's the nice award that we did to Shaina. All right. And we are also pleased today to be able to recognize the first Media, Film, and Journalism Studies Department scholar, who is Frank Teah. Frank is a person who is right now working as the program director for New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and he is part of the triumvirate here of the three who come from that organization to speak with us today. Before that, he worked with an organization called Global Kids, where he was the tutor who worked one-on-one and also with groups, educating particularly young people from marginalized communities about how to access their own agency and power. Frank is an effective communicator and is a person who has a real commitment to bringing about justice in people's lives. And he also has a wonderful sense of humor and is a terrific writer and was a journalism major. So for those of you who have I think there probably are a few journalism majors in here. So he's a person who has done a lot of writing in the past, as well as speaking and having some interest in storytelling. So I want to recognize him as well. So, and I'm going to give you your award too. So let me open up that little box. And you can stand up, Frank, and pretend you haven't seen this. I want to recognize that one of the things that is really fun about my job as being a professor is having this opportunity to be able to find people who I've admired and who I've followed on social media and who I've been really interested in watching as their careers have unfolded and having the opportunity to bring them here to campus. So I'm really thrilled to be able to bring our speakers here, particularly because this is the year that we're launching what we're calling the 4D program. So some of you have heard about that, the 4-dimensional student, who we are hoping to cultivate here at the University of Denver by trying to emphasize the importance of intellectual reflection and growth, character and the ability to collaborate, work together with integrity, well-being, the desire and the ability to respect ourselves and to respect the well-being of those around us, and living a purposeful life. And I think each of our guests today exemplify this. And so I hope that you'll have an opportunity to talk about their conversations after this in each of your classes. And I'm very pleased to be able to introduce you to Shaina, Andrea, and Frank.
Hi everyone. So we're gonna start. So we're gonna start with introductions. We're really happy to be here. Thank you so much for being here. I could just quickly go into more about myself. Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Andrea Gonzales. My pronouns are she, they. I am a 20-year-old queer mestiza youth advocate, an educator. I teach and I discuss and write about my work at the intersection of racial justice, gender justice, educational justice, and also abolition. I am an abolitionist, and I work really hard in New York City to abolish the police, defund the police, and also divest from relationships with the prison system in New York City. I am a college student. I am a senior within the CUNY system. I am studying child advocacy and social justice. I made that major myself. I'm really passionate about the way that we can empower young people to be taking the baton from this generation. As we can see here, these are my mentors, and it's really important to have these folks in my life, because without them, I really wouldn't be in the place that I am today. And so thinking about what we can do for the next generation so they can continue the work that we are doing now. Each generation has to have the responsibility to take on, whatever the revolution looks like. So I love teaching, and that's what I really found. I found my place within New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and found that I really do have a love for being with young people every day, and it's trying to inspire them and radicalize themselves, and start that journey to get engaged with their community. So I think that's it on me. Shaina,
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Andrea. Thank you guys again for coming out today. My name is Shaina Harrison. I am the Education Director at New Yorkers Against Gun Violence. I'm really, really excited to be here. We had a master class this morning that was just super dope, and we were able to have really great conversations. And I think my sole purpose in life is to energize young folks to have brave conversations that are super hard to have. And as long as I'm doing that, I'm happy. I started doing this work at a very young age, very similar to Andrea. I was 15 when I started to do work around social justice, and I'll be honest with you and say that it wasn't fun, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do because it was cute, and I can take cool pictures on Instagram and post them. It was really, really about survival for me. I had to learn how to advocate for myself because there was no one else to do it, and at that time I didn't even know that's what I was doing. I just felt like, hey, my voice has to matter. It just has to. And the way I got introduced to New Yorkers Against Gun Violence was they literally asked me to join a program that they were having about why young people picked up guns. And at the time, I was working for a nonprofit organization called the Crown Heights Mediation Center. And I said to them, I don't want to do that. But it was my job, so I did it. And when I got there, I looked around, and there was a lot of young people who looked like me. And they were asking young folks, why do you pick up guns? Why do you pick up guns in the community? And they were writing things down. And then they took those recommendations, and a bunch of elected officials came into the room. The mayor, the chief of police, public advocate, and they placed those recommendations in front of them. And they said, this is why young people are picking up guns, and this is what they need. And it was the first time that I actually felt like an expert. I actually felt like my lived experiences mattered. And I was like, wait, how do we continue to do this kind of work? I know so many young people who are brilliant. They have so many ideas. They are close, the closest people to the problem are usually the closest people to the solution. But unfortunately, we are not bringing those people into the room to have these conversations. So at that age, I was trying to figure out a way to make sure that young folks had an opportunity to have these conversations. And that has been a lot like the one that we're sitting in today, for us to have these brave conversations. So again, thank you so much for letting us come in and speak with you guys. And I encourage you all to be brave moving forward in this room.
So one of the hardest parts of my job is going after Shaina and Andrea because they're really hard act to follow. But I think I'll try. My name is Frank Teah. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. My inception into this work actually starts really, really young. So my parents fled the Liberian Civil War, right? So as a young kid, I worked on my struggle, and I always wondered like why the path to citizenship was so difficult for folks, especially coming from the global South. So that's kind of my interest in like human rights and activism kind of early. Then I got accepted into the High School for Global Citizenship, which kind of gets you to think about like where they fit inside our global community. So seeing that issues are bigger than just you and your community, right? So at 16 or 17, I was chosen for a trip to do conflict resolution in Jamaica, Costa Rica, Panama, and Colombia. We took a ship to, I think it's from Jamaica to Colombia. It was a guy there who ran for president in Costa Rica named Otom Solis, a pretty known left candidate. He lost by a few votes, but he was having this speech. So then I asked him, like, you know, folks say a lot of good things, but once they get in office, things change. So is it safe to say that kind of humans are kind of prone to corruption? So he stumbled with the question and took me around to answer. He answered it, but after he came to me and said, "Yo, thank you for the question, and could we do like a joint lecture together?" And I was 17 years old. So I think that's the first time I realized that, well, youth can have a voice and be really powerful. So ever since then, kind of my goal was to kind of empower youth and show them that they can do way more than they think that they're capable of, right? So I try to meet folks where they're at, but also show folks that where you're at isn't necessarily where you're finished, and you're capable of far more than you think you are. So that's what we do throughout New York City in a variety of different ways. We show up as we are. We're really intentional of how we walk into schools and how we try to really get youth to kind of take advantage or take control of their own education process, because there's so many things that leave them helpless or leave them powerless. We want to empower them through education, knowing that you are the expert at certain things and you can do really well at that. So that's our goal at New York Against Gun Violence, and I'm really grateful to have two amazing colleagues who just make life and work so much easier. So.
Frank's laying it on thick. He doesn't. He's laying it on thick right now. I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about our organization before we get started. New York Against Gun Violence is both a C3 and a C4 organization. And every time someone asks me about like what's the difference between the two organizations, I think the difference between the two is what's so magical to me is that NYAGV understands that in order to really reduce gun violence, you have to both look at the supply side of gun violence and also the demand side of gun violence. Most folks just pick one, right? So a lot of people put all their time and their attention to legislation and advocacy and trying to figure out how to change policy and write laws, and don't think about the young people who are disproportionately affected by gun violence and picking up guns in the first place. When you don't have two focuses like this, right? You'll see things like bills that support mass incarceration, right? Yeah, might get guns off the street, but what does that do to families, right? It's important to really look at gun violence and all the nuances around it, because that's the realest way to kind of tackle it. So that's what our organization does. NYAGV Exxon, you know, the organization educates and empowers youth and communities throughout New York State to reduce gun violence. We teach a gun violence prevention program, and about 4 of the boroughs in New York City, we are currently in about 17 different high schools teaching gun violence prevention at a public health issue for a 4-credit class. That is unheard of. We have been teaching race theory way before we should have. But we have been figuring out ways to have like these real conversations with young people about, the root causes of gun violence. Our, 501c3 organization is the oldest gun violence prevention advocacy organization in New York. We advocate for laws and policies to reduce gun violence locally, statewide, and nationally. One of the things that's really important for us is to teach young people how to advocate for themselves, and then connect them to folks who work for them. And also allowing them to go to, Albany, allowing them, to get to Washington, D.C. for them to figure out how do they speak to their elected officials, how do they advocate for the things that they need in their community to reduce gun violence.
So I used to be director of operations with Guns. We were founded in 2018 after the parking shooting. So what we noticed in the conversation was that there was a really big focus on what happened to students and how they were being impacted by gun violence. And mass shootings make up less than 1% of the gun violence. The whole 99% that disproportionately affects marginalized people. And so we created an organization to center marginalized young people that were being impacted by gun violence and making sure they were getting into rooms and having conversations with lawmakers to make sure they're creating solutions. Like, that experience that Shaina had when she was younger. And so we are taking a holistic approach. And so one of the main policy things that we are actually really into right now is creating safe and supportive schools. When we create safe and supportive schools, that means, reducing the police presence in these schools, making sure we have guidance counselors, making sure we have books instead of, more cops. All of these things impact our educational experience and as a result, impact the way that gun violence appears in our community, which we'll get into later about the risk factors and protective factors. But yeah, we're in the guns, and if you want to talk more about that, we can later. But yeah, we can go right into it. Okay, community agreements. So we have some quick community agreements. One, we really want you to focus on the statement of guaranteeing safety and not comfort. Jim, if you want to jump in about that.
Yes, guaranteeing safety, not comfort is probably my favorite community org. I make sure that, the young people that I'm working with understand what that means. It's important that the fact is we're gonna have a hard conversation. The stuff is new, right? And I can guarantee that you're gonna be safe here, but I cannot guarantee that you're gonna be comfortable here because nothing real happens in comfortable places, right? People always say, well, this is a safe place, this is a safe space. I don't create safe spaces. Nothing happens in safe spaces. I create brave spaces because brave spaces allow people to, say things that might be weird to say in other places, right? But that's where learning begins for me, right? So I think it's important for us to understand that we can guarantee you safety, but just not comfort. We also have the Las Vegas rule. How many of you guys have heard of the Las Vegas rule?
Who's been to Las Vegas actually?
A lot of us, right? Can somebody tell me what the Las Vegas rule is? Yes. Yes, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So a lot of times you go into these places where people are talking about their lived experiences and, it's good stuff happening. And then unfortunately we walk out the room and we kind of like, talk about those, what was happening in the room. The learning can leave, right? But the personal stories, the connections and those kinds of things, that's very sacred to the healing process. And we gotta keep that in the room. The learning can go, but certain things we keep in the room. We can agree to do that? That's perfect.
And last thing, take care of our needs. So one of that is asking us to speak up, speak slower, you go faster, you walk out, and it's really comfortable. Do that because we want you to be safe and, as comfortable as you possibly can. You really prioritize your health and learning within this space. Okay.
Race is the hardest thing to talk about.
Right.
It's just this. So take care of yourself. The last, community agreement that we don't have up here, that I think is really important, is that it's okay to change your mind. Right? A lot of us walk in here with traditions, with viewpoints that are part of who we are. And when someone challenges those things, it's hard. But there's so much space to learn in those challenges. I just want you guys to know that it's okay to change your mind about what you thought. It doesn't make you a bad person before. It's okay to change your mind. I just want to encourage you guys to know that, because in every space that I'm in, I always learn something more than I did before. And I change my mind a lot. I'm that, and I'm also that. And I want you guys to know that that can be you too.
Wonderful. Okay, so we're getting right into our first activity. We're gonna need 16 volunteers. We have candy.
Let's put on our mask.
Yeah.
People feel comfortable on now. So if you raise your hand, come up, we want you to do a shoe, we three, you want you in the back? Awesome. What do you got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I need about, come on. Yes, I love it. See, we're judging you. We're trying to see how long it takes you to do this versus our 14-year-old.
So I think we might need to.
You have to beat them then, okay?
I think we got 15.
We need one more.
One more, awesome.
Wonderful. Okay, so we don't have limited space. The other space has a lot more. Should we go on that side?
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone come over here. Okay, I'm gonna need y'all to share your birthdays, so I want you to line up in birthday order.
So we're asking them to line up in birthday order.
Right. So here, January over here, January over here, and December all together.
January?
Yes.
6, 7.
Yes. Someone I'm not told. Like you. They didn't know.
First after the game, okay? After the game. So now, over.
You know what? He's just so tall.
All right, did everyone get candy? Okay. All you gotta do is play rock, paper, scissors. If you lose, you have to do it. And just. Yeah, you put it. Yeah,
So-
for 5 minutes.
All right, guys. So for folks in the audience, just so you guys know what's happening, they're playing rock, paper, scissors. Each time they win, they get a piece of candy, they get to keep it.
Just go.
Move over the candy and they want to come to the bank. Frank and Andrea and I are the bank. And ask for another Starburst. We will give you another one. However, you owe us 2 at the end of the game. Okay?
5, you owe us 10.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So real quick. The screen, like the thing that's on Zoom, it only has audio through these particular 3 mics. Okay. So I was just to say, when you're doing instruction or just saying what's going on, right, if one of you can at least just kind of talking to those two. Oh, so like, yeah, so when you're way over there, okay. But you don't have to be right in front of you. Like, if you hear me right there. Yeah, so thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Just so they have more perspective. Got it. That works. We got you. So on Zoom, they are playing rock, paper, scissors. Put them in order by their birthday. We gave them candy according to their birthday. We told them if they buy, then they're able to come back to the bank and ask us for more candy. For each piece of candy that we give them, they have to give us 2 back.
I need to go to the bank. Can I get some from the bank, guys?
Okay, what's the bench? This one, okay.
So this is your family. Got it.
She wants some, so she gave it back to you.
Oh, you gave it back. You paid us back already. Oh, wow.
She wants to put it on the one. I'll also drop one on the floor. And we'll take a seat.
Guys are lining back up in birthday order.
Okay, now I need y'all to line up in a mouse of candy back pal. Yeah, more over here, none over there. 7. Wow, you're at the top before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
No, none, okay.
He forgot the dad. I'm also gonna ask folks who owe us money, who borrowed from the bank to give us back our money, please, thank you. If you owe us, please pay up. Anyone else owe us?
Like that?
Okay, good.
Cool.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so how is it playing? Did you have fun?
Very
fun. Yeah? Okay. Okay, so how did it feel to win? Where did you start with?
Like where in line?
Yeah, where in line did you start?
I was right over there,
Okay, it's like in the middle of the year?
next to the man in blue.
Okay.
So you were right at the
I
top?
was right at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
How many pieces of candy did you have?
I started with 2.
You started off with 2 pieces of candy. This is interesting. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And how many pieces of candy do you have now?
I have 10 right now.
You have 10.
Look
What's your name?
Dan?
Dan? I
Okay.
like you, Dan. I like the way you play the game, Dan.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
It's the exception. This is the shame that they give you.
Start with 5 and how many do you have? 2 and a half. 2 and a half. Okay. Start with No, 0, 0. Okay, awesome. So how did you, I don't know, how did the outcome make you
So you said something that's interesting, right? You said you started off with how many pieces of candy? 2. You ended up with how many at the end of this game? 0. You said it made you feel bad. It also made you feel like you were bad at rock, paper, scissors. Right? Oh, but that's what we're playing, rock, paper, scissors. How many of you guys actually think he's bad at playing this game? Interesting. How many of you guys think he's not bad at playing this game?
Okay, so far.
That's a good amount of people. So somebody tell me, somebody in the audience, tell me why you think he's not bad at playing this game.
We all just raised our hand.
like rock, paper, scissors is kind of like a chance.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So anyone else wanna go ahead? Go for it.
I noticed that he has. So I'm assuming not two, but he's not.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Gotcha.
It has to do with the hand that he was held when he started off the game.
Okay, awesome. All right, so cool.
So-
That's really good point.
Really good points. And I heard a really great thing I heard is that had a lot to do with the hand that he was dealt. Right? So maybe he's not as bad as he thinks he is at this game. The fact of the matter is he started off with 2 pieces of candy. How many pieces of candy did you start off with?
I didn't count, it was a lot.
It was a lot. And I counted. I think it was about 13. 13 pieces of candy. How many pieces of candy do you have now? 8. How many pieces of candy did you start with? Do you remember?
3.
3. How many do you have now? 8. Come on here. I want to talk to you two about the strategy.
For sure.
All right.
What did it look like?
So I remembered what people threw, and then I would just play them again.
Okay, so keep in mind that, because how did we start with?
I started with 3.
All right, so he had to be extra strategic to figure out how he would get more, right? So keep that in mind, right? So I had to be extra resourceful, right? That he would have been otherwise. Keep that in mind, all right? Dan, all right?
Yep.
Go for it, Dan.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, there was no strategy.
Okay.
Complete guesswork every time, no acknowledgement of who else.
Gotcha. I like the honesty there.
So I just want to something that's over here.
I guess, did it go down the line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, cool, cool.
That is extremely important. Sorry, Andrea.
You didn't really touch the second round, you also got. Right?
So this is important to talk about, right? Because you had no idea what folks got on the side of the room, right? You just know what the young person got next to you. And it was very similar to what you had. So you didn't question it. This is just how it is. It also led you to believe that you weren't good at the game. Right? You started to question your own ability in playing the game, not about what you actually had to start off playing the game in the first place. It's interesting.
Cool.
Anyone else? Want to talk about the experience?
Oh, go for it. Yes.
I got to a good amount and then I stopped playing.
Okay.
Yeah, like why would you play more and risk losing? When you know, like I have 8 candies right now, I'm vibing. That's 16 pieces. We'll be eating for the next 3 days.
That's smart, right?
Right?
I got my check, I'm out the game. Sounds like me, sis.
So, I noticed like after I lost a lot, like 6 in a row, one of my friends was like, how do you still have so many?
Yeah.
Even though I lost a bunch in a row.
Yeah, so how is it that he took so many risks, right? But still doing quite well, especially better than the front? That's a really good question, all right? Like that, keep that in mind.
So I guess the question I have for, I'm about to say this for the folks out here. Why do you think that we might play a game like this in high school? What are we talking about here? Cool. Do we just want to give people cavities? Like, what do we? What's the point?
Okay, so showcase the quality, both awesome, really well said. Anyone else?
Talking about how minorities versus disadvantaged disadvantaged.
Okay, so come up here, teach.
Right now, yeah.
Yes. Can anybody
Somebody talk to me about the way Andrea lined folks up in the room, right, by their birthdays. Why is that important? I see someone in the back. Okay.
Oh, okay. You don't choose your birthday. That's just random. Like it's what you get based on when you're. Anyways.
That, you had no choice. Did anyone want to add to that? Why is that significant in not having the choice? I think I'm sorry. Why is that significant in not necessarily having the choice of a birthday? Why is it significant in determining how many candies you get?
Because in addition to like you not being able to choose it, it's also like the person who brought their sisters, it's not gonna be someone on the other side of the group. Probably gonna rock the sisters and someone who's right next to you. So those with less are fighting against those who also have less.
All right, let's go. I think we're done. You guys got it. Good job, everybody.
Awesome, right? So,
But this is important too, when this idea of black crime laws.
yeah.
Y'all got it. We
That's
don't
awesome,
even
right?
need
Things happen in proximity, all the time, all right? Really well said. That was awesome.
Yeah, but the main question is asking whether or not the game was fair.
What's this
So
game?
what do you think? Was the game fair? Okay, cool. Any reasons why not? Who wants to explain why not? Okay, awesome.
People that started with less have less of a chance of teaching theirs, and then once they get like that, it's harder to get back in the game.
We gonna say, right? Especially since it's a game of probability, right? There's no like rule to it, yeah.
There are two folks on the end who actually started with a lot less than the majority of folks that's playing this game. But they ended up having a lot more candy than the rest of the group. Do we ever see that in our society? Name a person where that has happened to, is a famous person. Oprah, Jay-Z, who else? LeBron James. What happens with these two people? When we're having conversations around privilege, right? We're having conversations about the lack of resources. Don't they usually take these two people and smack them in our faces? But wait, look at these two.
If they could do it.
If they can do it, the other 16 is on you. Are these two people a representation of what really happens when you get two pieces of candy? No. Does it exist? Can it happen? Of course, right? And I'm so grateful that you guys were able to do that, because it's important for us to understand that these things do happen. And a lot of times in communities of color, you know, these are the poster children to success. It's like, hey, but what about these two? They did it. So you don't have any excuse as to why you weren't able to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. At the end of the day, everybody has personal choice, but we need to pay attention to some of the systems, all the systems that are in place that keeps people from, keeps people having two pieces of candy from the very beginning. Anybody want to add anything to this? Yes, please.
The American dream, things like that. These are ingrained into our culture as Americans. In addition, we've talked about this in our class. Every person would rather assume that they're closer to becoming a billionaire rather than living in poverty. And so that culture is really a great tool to convince poor people that what they're doing is not enough.
Absolutely.
And that if they can, game the system or figure it out, they'll be able to get there. But that's just not, as we've seen in this example and in our everyday life, that is not the case for a majority of people. So,
thank you, I received that. And it's important, right, to have a conversation about like the most marginalized people actually believe and this idea that you can pull yourself up by bootstraps, right? And it has a lot to do with this idea of powerlessness. If I feel so powerless, and then you're explaining to me that there are systems that have been created to keep me powerless, it makes me feel more powerless. I want to believe in some place that I have power, and I'm taking that narrative. Like, no, that doesn't exist. This is all about my personal choice. It's really hard for people who are marginalized to believe that there are systems out there that keep them in the spaces that they're in. It's really hard. It makes you feel a lot more powerless than you want to admit, right? So you hear people say, "Oh, I'm just not good. I'm just not lucky. I just don't know how to play this game." Instead of understanding that there are systems out there that make sure that you got two pieces of candy.
going against somebody that had less candy than me, like I felt a little bad like taking this one of their last pieces. But like the name of the game was to like win as much as you can. Like I felt a little like conflicted, like should I just have like let them keep it or like should I keep going? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was, like thinking about that.
Absolutely. We see that every day with people who are dealing with privilege and don't necessarily know, like, at the end of the day, people who he started off with 20 pieces of candy because of his birthday. That's nothing, he didn't do that. You know what I mean? That has nothing to do with him, right? So why should he feel, now that we're talking about, why we're playing this game, why should he feel bad that he had 20 pieces of candy, right? And that's hard. That's where the hard part comes. It's like, I was born with this privilege. I didn't ask for this. I don't want this. Right? So like, how is it my fault that I have 20 pieces of candy? She just gave it to me. I don't even know who this lady is. Right? And we understand that, right? We understand. You want to say something?
Okay, sorry.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, like there's also like the lottery at first, and like when you have like what you get, what skills you get, and you have all of these famous people like LeBron James, he's tall and he can play basketball, right?
I think.
He can play basketball, and I'm like 5'4", and I'm like, oh, like I can't do that. And it's like he's lucky, but then you were also like taking away from how hard he worked as a Black man to get to that level, and it's just like this interesting balance that you have.
Absolutely. I think we're getting to a place where we want to discuss this idea of what violence is. Do you guys think this game is violent? If you say no, keep your hands down.
No, but we.
No.
Yeah. I saw you shake your head. Do you want to shake it?
But now that I have a microphone, I realize that is not the right thing for me in my head. No, now you understand there was some violence that people having like their property taken from them, even though it was the rule of the game. But that's my 2 cents.
I received that. Thank you for that.
Anyone else? Perhaps someone who said no also. Anyone else wants to say why they perhaps voted why? Okay. Oh, I got you. Go for it.
There's a difference between violence and hostility and experience. So I think that people were not necessarily violent. There was no exchange of no one got hurt, but it was still you were forcibly taken something.
That's interesting. I received that. Thank you for that.
That no one got hurt and replacing this with money, but the person at the very end can end up losing their home, they can end up homeless, they can end up having no food, no job, no way to feed their family, and that is violence. You do get hurt like this.
I received that. Thank you for that.
But you could have chosen to stop playing, like, because you chose to stop playing when you had a lot. So his choices ultimately led up to what happened. And I don't think they were like meant to be hurtful, but his choices led up to that, the same as why your choices led up to what you have.
This is the brave part. I love this. It's good. It's good. I feel uncomfortable in here.
I'm gonna let you revote on that, but let's go right ahead. Oh, cool. I saw a hand in the crowd. I apologize. Go for it.
So that's also how it's usually see on this person, say, oh, their choice is that. But it could have been, they have some kind of mental illness that they were born with it, and have the choice in that led them down the path to where they are, or they could have the economy could have come in a way that someone's more privileged wouldn't see as big of an effect. It is
their choices, but also not their choices at the same time.
Yeah, awesome. I saying something a long time ago that really put into that, and I'll say after I hear from support it.
All right, and then another thing is that you weren't told the rules of this game. You weren't told you could stop at any time. I had to ask her, and she was like, "Oh yeah, sure." No, but if she said no, like, then I would have continued. Probably ended up with a lot less. So it depends on your mentor, the people you have in your life who are guiding you. And if you are under the impression that you can't actually stop and you're going to continue, and maybe you'll win, but maybe you'll down there.
We have someone over here too.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna go right here, then I'm gonna go. Okay, cool. Go for it.
In my opinion, I don't think it really is a choice for some people. Just because if you're someone who started with 2 pieces of candy, like participating in this game is like game survival. It's not really a choice. Otherwise, you just end up with 2 pieces of candy for the rest of your life. And some people can't, like, you can't, that's not livable. That's not life. And so some people are forced into this game while others are playing to like succeed and like go above the others, but others are just playing to like feed themselves and feed their families. So it's not really a choice for everyone, I don't think.
Awesome. So what Shaina kind of said earlier, some time back was, she told me,
let her go first. Sorry.
Also, just one thing with violence, you also have to put in the deal with risk. And so, yeah, you knew that it was risk in going into that, but the rules that you guys place is get as much candy, doesn't say how much, but he still wanted at least one piece, so he had to still play by the rules of the game that he doesn't involve. So I think that is really a violent.
Thank you.
cool. And I think instead of asking if everyone has choices, perhaps we should ask what are folks choosing from, right? Because everyone is
Stop
happy.
that. Say that again.
Huh?
Say it again.
So I think instead of asking whether or not folks have choices, right? Because of course the answer is yes. We should ask what are folks choosing from, right? Some folks have to choose from losing 20 candies, losing 2, right? Those choices aren't even equal, all right? So if we can let the real world, I think we can see where I'm going with having limited choices versus having a plethora of different choices, all right? And what we do based on this, okay?
Does anybody else need to want to say something? Sure.
The way that I kind of think about it though, is we're talking about the choices we made. Look at how many of us are up here compared to the amount of people that are still out there. I mean, all 16 of us made the choice to be up here. So it's kind of like, there's a point in this example where you have to draw the line between the game and what it's representing. Because, I mean, people don't really choose to be born, but like, we all made the conscious choice to come up here and play this game. So that's kind of the way I was thinking about it.
And just another point I wanted to mention about like making choices is like sometimes when people see like someone that's homeless on the side of the road looking aside, so many people are so quick to say like, oh, why don't they go get a job? But what they don't realize is they're like, you need a bank account, you need certain criteria to get a job, and people who are in those financial situations can't even meet that criteria at all. So if they wanted to get a job, they would. So like something like that, like they could make the choice, but they don't have the criteria for it, so they're just stuck in that margin.
Thank you for that. I have 2 more, and I think we should move on.
IRISE, I'm unaware, I'm sorry. But it was like, we're all like 2 or 3 like bad decisions away from becoming like who we like here. And so it's like, yeah, you are making choices, and so like depending on your position already, you have like there's a lot of bad decisions that you guys can start off with like you, and then like from there it's like even if it's like, oh, it's all these personal choices, like everybody can try to make like a couple bad personal choices and
Some choices are more consequential. What is
I thought it was really interesting because it comes along how your environment, historical, I think whatever it is, actually a lot of how far you can go, no matter whether you like that or not. You're like whatever, like Microsoft, maybe it's like other people have different people.
is a family, we do recognize the power.
Well, I want to go back to your question because I would like to know the answer. Was this being violent? For me, I have a question in my mind. Is there a difference between something being hurtful and something being violent? Or experiencing hurt or being a victim of violence? So I don't know if you'll get to that, but I would like to
I think so. I hope so. I think that the idea for us is to walk out of this space understanding and the nuances of violence and also the nuances of justice. So I'm not going to give you guys the answer, and I don't think any of my colleagues will. But hopefully, once we walk out of here, that we will all feel differently about those two words and what they mean to us. I think that's the goal. Thank you guys so much for participating in this game. We'll have some more stuff, but this is
People in the back of the room didn't get as many, so if you have some extras, please give them to the back. Yeah, if you have extra Starbucks, please share them in the back.
So thank you again for everyone who participated. Yeah, and thank you everyone for being like honest and brave. That was a really intense conversation. Like the first session didn't go like that, and so it was really cool for y'all to like actually be honest about what you're thinking. Basically, what we wanted to talk about is that all oppression is violence. Someone brought up in the last session, the last masterclass, that this game kind of robbed you of your safety, your peace. Like people who had two were really stressed out during the game. They were anxious. They didn't know what would happen when they stopped playing. They didn't really know what we were playing for. They were just playing rock, paper, scissors, and that was stressful. We actually gave one piece of candy to one person, and she ended up with like 5 pieces of candy in debt, and she was stressed. And it was just a game. Like imagine what it would be like with real money, with real life consequences when you cannot provide for your child, when you can't give them something to eat at the end of the day, when you can't even have a roof over your head. All of these things are real life consequences, and that's incredibly violent. It's traumatic. It hurts us. Whether we don't have to get punched in the face or whatever it is for it to be violent. So all oppression is violence. And there's a really good quote by Coretta Scott King that says, starving a child is violence, neglecting school children is violence, punishing a mother and her family is violence, discrimination against a working man is violence, and contempt for poverty is violence. And basically what we want to explain today is that any kind of discrimination, any kind of robbery of their safety and peace of marginalized people, or any person really, is an act of violence. And oppression doesn't stop at the interpersonal level, not just taking someone's property, but like literal institutions and policies and government structures that are working towards hurting people and exploiting them and exploiting their well-being. Yeah, do you want to add anything before we go on? Okay, sounds good. So Frank, if you want to talk about that.
Awesome, right? So I think some folks have heard redlining, I don't want to assume, but I think we've heard, I'll just go ahead. So 3 out of 4 neighborhoods in USA that were redlined, right? So redlining was a policy in the 30s, after to pull folks out of depression and into the economy renegade. The policy that made sure some folks got home loans, right? So the typically 4 categories, there were like hazardous or desirable, and depending on where you were and what the skin color was, your neighborhood will be deemed as desirable and you were allowed home loans and given home loans. In some cases not, right? So as we know, the main way to deal with America was through homeownership, right? Some folks were denied, some folks weren't, right? I think we know who probably wasn't and who was likely to, right? So we'll go to the next slide. So in the US, Black folks are about 30% population, and roughly about 42 million, right? US top is about 330, right? There you go to the next one. But only 3% of the wealth are Black folks, all right? And there's reasons for that, right? Underlying 7 factors, decades and generations of systemic neglect have led to the wealth being so far less than everyone else. All right, so cool. The next one.
Yeah, okay, so we're talking about wealth, people who have some, because of who they are, because of things they can't control, like your birthday, have the ability to purchase, have homes and be in wealthy neighborhoods. So these are two neighborhoods in New York City. Is anyone familiar with these? Okay, cool, awesome. Okay, so can anyone like spot any immediate differences between Soho and Mott Haven? What designer store in Soho? Yeah, or do you want to grab some perspective?
Yes.
Looks like there's, the homeless guys, they do the side street of the mile track.
Yeah, okay, cool. Like that's well. Thank you.
So I'm actually from Montford. So, in the road, and I will say that Mott Haven has a bunch of food all the time, and it's like fascinating, and like walking around the circle is completely different.
We will say, you kind of jumped on us, but we will explain the role that was releasing on phase and time, right?
Like, it just so here, so like, look at the streets, like, you can see those, like, there's a big difference in the streets, they're like made out of like individual, like rocks and like nice and like paved, and then if you look at like Mott Haven, it's just like streets, like normal streets. Another thing is that there's often like police standing in front of like nicer stores and like good like security, and just like the money that they put into the construction of the buildings is like has more money, and also like all the stores are nicer.
Thank you.
Make a population difference.
The businesses and just the resources that they use just fast food everywhere. Media type, professionals and everything, but not a lot of resources.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, oh no.
Okay, I also wanted to ask, like, since we're not from Denver, are there any communities in Denver that kind of have this like very, I don't know, they feel
Difference.
different and they feel different?
Anyone else inside? Halifax compared to Nashville?
Okay, so which neighborhood did you say is probably like well kept a little better funded?
Definitely Castle Rock area. It's like suburban. And then Halifax is not too far from here, but like any time it comes up, there's always people that are like, oh, be careful in that area. So like just even the connotation of the areas.
Yeah. And narratives persist and they play a big role in how people view that, right? Especially how people from there view that as well, right? But the reasons for that is kind of what we discussed about. I see your hand up. Sorry.
So for me, the increase in Halifax very like down, it's not designed with accessibility for pedestrians. So if you go to Cherry Creek, not only do you have these like gigantic mansions that are historic, they're crafted perfectly, you also have Cherry Creek Mall, which is full of giant stores that they have they have Tiffany's, they have like everything there. So you can notice these differences, probably more like Cherry Creek and Gold.
My mom owns a condo that's on the corner of 14th and Colfax, and whenever we go there to like work on it or anything, she's always like, oh, be super careful, like be super alert when you're walking, because it's like really sketchy, and when I lived here, I had to be super careful about it. And then, like, that's just a really different area than like when my dad lived in Denver, which is like a really nice, like super nice place near Wash Park and everything. So there's definitely like also just the kinds of things that are like near where my mom's condo is on Colfax. The like kind of restaurants or the kind of stores you see, or just like even the kind of parks versus like where my dad lives, which is a very nice place. So there's like really high-end restaurants and really super nice parts. And so there's just kind of a difference. And then it's like, oh, well, people who are used to being from like nicer places, like don't go to the other places because it's like either something you don't want to look at just because it doesn't look as nice, or like it's sketchy and not safe.
We're also in one right now, like university Denver, such like a gentrified part of Denver. And like as soon as you cross Island, there's a 7-Eleven on the corner of Island and Colorado, and like that's like a 2-minute walk from one of my classes. It's so run down. It's like there's such a stark difference between this school that we pay $50,000 for, and a 7-Eleven on the corner.
I was also going to make that point that you can see stark differences in very small distances. Colfax too, like there's a section of Colfax where you can go like every block there's like motels and just other, more run down, I guess, places. But then there's also like the block of Colfax that's near Denver, the other college campus that's really close to us in Denver. And you can tell that that part's like exponentially nicer. There's more access to like public transit and other things like that.
I was going to say that too. When you mentioned Colfax, there are some areas in Colfax, like near University Hospital and Children's Hospital out in Aurora, that are very nice because the university decided to build there. Other businesses came in and it became gentrified. And that is the look of gentrification and how it can turn that into that. And then, of course, the folks who historically have been there have been priced out taxes-wise. The old businesses move out, the new businesses move in, more resources, different neighborhood, everything changes.
And because Denver is not completely like a new place, I see a lot of movies and memories out of outskirts, like Aurora is actually one of them, but that's in the process of being justified. But the River North District is an area in Denver that apparently is not very local, and it's actually the wrong. But I think it historically used to be a Latino area in Kansas, was part of gentrified, now it's like one of the north, and a bunch of phenomenal communities live there, and people go there to go see murals. But they're not murals that are like cultural murals, like people have been paid to take things. Now there's like breweries and coffee shops. So a lot of gentrification is already like on Denver. And
the name change is a big one, right? So in New York City, South Bronx, right? You know that, right? South Bronx. People not called Sobro, right? So Sobro sounds a lot more inviting than South Bronx, right? So we go to the name change or Best Buy, doing that Best Buy, Heights. Same place, different names, right? I right to the good. So good point.
Well, I was gonna mention the Colorado Springs and Pueblo, like historically, they're right across each other, but when Colorado Springs was founded, it was founded in North Town. And so all of the labor was coming from the purposely pricing, at the time, like people, so they could work in the resort town, like it's still the same. But it's interesting, like compared to Denver or Boulder, both of those areas, I guess politically, are also the travel economies, ideologies there. It's just it's not great.
One more.
Yeah, I cannot under that. Very time. I'm from Pueblo, and there's a scandal a year and a half ago that the governor labeled Pueblo as a dead city in order to protect the because he thought it was not worth investing economically. Coincidentally, Pueblo is also one of the most diverse communities in Colorado. It has a very high Hispanic population. Spanish is spoken more commonly than English there. So I think it was, really strange coincidence that the city that is one of the oldest, actually in the running for the capital of Colorado, but then this went to Denver because it was like a white city, and so Denver became the capital. So I saw some really big coincidence that we were in a dead city. the people there are still very much alive, still very much creative and diverse, but because most of the people there were people of color, it was dead.
Thank you so much.
So this investment is without a doubt, right, intentional, right? So the Louis was there, right? And those meetings, folks have had it forever, right? Doesn't mean he got caught that time, but really intentional, right? And they do cause actual harm, and especially with actual violence, right? And lead to a lot more violence, which I'll follow up.
And I appreciate so many folks raising their hand. We're gonna do a lot more like discussion questions, so we'll definitely get to you at one point. But some of the things that I picked up while y'all were talking was like in neighborhoods like Soho or Cherry Creek, there are more job opportunities. There is better health. I think you were talking about the overall hospitals. You know, these are good, well-funded hospitals. That means that children's health is well, the community's health is well. We have access to good food. There's food security in these neighborhoods. And just the living is a lot nicer, clearly. And those are all protective factors of communities. So we have child health, economic stability, housing stability, and high quality education. These are the resources that allow people to thrive in a community. When we have access to these, people are allowed to dream. People are allowed to go and go to other places. They're able to get quality education so they can, I don't know, continue learning and continue growing as people. And this just makes us feel safe. We're safe when we have these things and have access to these things. And so the direct opposite of these things are the risk factors. That's poverty and child poverty, economic instability, housing instability, and experiencing or witnessing trauma or violence. These are the factors that endanger our health. And we find these in neighborhoods that are incredibly divested in. Like, we do not see money coming into these neighborhoods. Folks don't own their homes, so the property taxes don't go into our schools. And we just see an incredible amount of violence. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, was Andrea. There's also one tip here to be in low to moderate income neighborhoods. Segregation among minority folks is also a big indicator of which neighborhoods seek more non-favorable source and also more gun violence, right? So without going to neighborhoods, if you just look at like a chart or the data tree, and if you saw these particularly high neighborhoods, you can indicate the amount of gun violence there versus places that have protective factors, all right? So this indicates that you can glance at and say, oh, cool, things happen a lot there, and probably not so much over there, all right?
Right. Yeah, thank you, Frank. So when we look at all these risk factors and protective factors, we come to this conclusion. There's a really cool graph from the Department of Health in New York City. I don't know, there should be like research about Denver, but we see there's a direct correlation between poverty and violence. So in a community like Soho, right, similar to Cherry Creek, there is a 7.8% of the neighborhoods in poverty, which leads to 84.5 non-fatal assaults per 100,000 people, right? So that's at the very, very bottom. All the way in Mott Haven, there is 41.5% of the neighborhoods in poverty. And that leads to 1,101 people per 100,000 that experience non-fatal assaults. And so these threats place residents in poverty and expose them to high risk throughout their lives, culminating in higher rates of violence. And so there's like a direct correlation. We can go into every single neighborhood, I think, in any kind of city, and we can see these things showing. Do you want to add about the poverty?
For sure, right? So when Andrea mentions 41% people live in poverty, that's an argument, right? However, that's only because in the US we have what we call a poverty threshold, right? So for individuals like 13,000, right? There are folks who make a little more than that who are still very much in poverty, right? But that don't meet the guidelines. So that number is actually pretty high, but there's folks who actually hit the poverty threshold, 21%. So it's probably more like 70 or so, right? Folks who are actually really struggling, like, and we're talking beyond paycheck to paycheck, who in New York City is really expensive, who can't make ends meet, who these different are essentially suitable. All right.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so how does disinvestment impact the likelihood of violence? Do you have an idea? Does I have a question?
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
When I was in high school, I worked for a nonprofit called Crossover Mission, and basically the goal of it was to get people invested in school, and in return, they were able to play sports, which was something a lot of families can't afford. So then during COVID, sports weren't available to them, so they lost all interest in studying and getting these tutors. So like there was disinvestment in them because they didn't have that thing that was keeping them going, so they couldn't play sports anymore, so they weren't looking to do their grades up, so they got involved in things that hurt them in the long run.
Well, when there's disinvestment in the communities, there's less money for the people. And when there's less money, they can't get certain resources. They can't buy certain products. So what do? They start robbing. And directly correlating with the problem people is they use violence to keep that up.
I think about the school prison pipeline and like this investment in education. Because kids are told that they are violent and are loud, always at the class, they're always just think that they're loud and violent and that they don't deserve to be there. And that just causes a lot more kids end up in jail or end up in a place not wrong. And then they get stuck in a system that doesn't allow them to leave. And it's just like a vicious cycle of violence.
Sorry.
Okay.
So as a personal experience growing up, I grew up in a neighborhood similar to Mount Vision in Los Angeles. And considerably, it was not as good as the community here in Denver. And so I actually wanted to bring this up like earlier, but I didn't get a chance to. I've experienced both Mount Vision and Soho, seeing how each community is different, how each person is like, oh, and might be a little controversial to say this right now, because everybody's like, oh, there's like these places are bad and these places are good, and they're labeled as these things. But how you experience them, not every place in Mount Vision or places similar to Mount Vision are bad, right? Not because even though the community that I grew up in was horrible, there was gang violence every single night, there would be gunshots, like when I'm asleep, I would go to bed, and there would be like just gunshots like ringing out nearby. And I would get so scared. But knowing my community, in the apartment that I lived in with my family, everybody was calm, everybody was collected. They were like, if you ever need support, we're always here for you, even though we don't know you. And it's the same thing here now. I really do enjoy community here in Denver. But sometimes it's just the experience that each person has is different, and they can't relate to you. They can't relate to what you say. And that's kind of how I saw things, seeing how the question earlier was based on these pictures and your own thoughts. What's the person that comes to mind? The person that comes to mind is that not everything might not be as it seems. You might see Mount Haven and say, oh, this is a bad community, I don't want to be here. But really, you could go in and people would be so nice to you. And they'd just be like, oh, you want to get to this place? I'm going to direct you there. This is how you get there. But sometimes you go to Soho and ask somebody, hey, how do I get to this store? And they just give you a stink eye. They're like, oh, you want to go there. So I will say, not all the time these places can be too bad. It might bring out more good in people. I was just going to go off of the schools prison pipeline comment and talk about how America's criminal justice system has not stopped punishing people even after their sentences have been complete. And just the disinvestment in people in that way, how you can't get a place to live, can't get a job, depending on what state you're in, can't vote. So just that really strong disinvestment in people and how punishment continues. Okay, so I was thinking about kind of like school systems and how like kind of the area that the school is in and like the people who live there is kind of like a cycle. So I'm from a suburb called Highlands Ranch. It's about 20 minutes south of here. And I just looked up the average household income in Highlands Ranch
is $125,000 a year. And then some people mentioned Aurora, and I looked that up, and theirs is $65,000 a year. So I actually went to a high school in Parker that it was not like a neighborhood school or anything, so people came from different places, and so a lot of students at that school were from Aurora and lived like in those neighborhoods that we consider like less safe. And then when people would say, "Oh, you're from Highland Ridge, you must be super rich. Everything where you live is super nice." And the high school that my neighborhood feeds into is called Mountain Vista, and I might be wrong, but I believe that Mountain Vista is the most highly funded public high school in the state of Colorado. And so, like, how the people who live in Highlands Ranch have more money, so then they can put more money into the school, which then turns out like higher graduation rates, and people who go back and end up living again in higher income communities, whereas like in Aurora, the schools don't have as much money because the people don't have as much money, meaning that the students who come out of there also go back into that. So it's just kind of like each one cycles because it's not being shared over.
Absolutely. I think that that's extremely important when we talk about the cycle of violence and what disinvestment and redlining really does and how it affects so many folks. Just a personal story. I think even when we talk to young people about disinvestment and how it shows up in their everyday life, like I didn't even realize that, my parents literally lied and said that I had a different address than I did so that I can go to a better school. And I didn't know why they needed to do that for me to go to a better school. I had good grades. I should have just been able to go to a good school. But when you're in 4th grade, that doesn't matter. You go to the school that you're zoned to go to, and that's the bottom line. I grew up in a community a lot like the community that this young lady talked a little bit about today. And like just learning about risk factors is hard, right? Because I look at my community and I love the people in my community. They are brilliant. They are strong and empathetic and powerful. And, it's hard for me to see those risk factors and say, because we live in the conditions that we live in, that we're going to be violent. That doesn't make me feel good. But it's important for me to understand that the people who are from my community and even myself, there are risk factors living in those spaces, And I think it's a testament to how, strong and just how so many people are still thriving in those spaces where there's so many risk factors, right? But I received that, and I'm just grateful for this conversation. I know it's hard to have, and we all have different lived experiences, but what we're doing here is this is the solution. These are solutions here. When we talk about what the solutions look like, they look like this room. And so I'm grateful that you guys are, really being honest and open today. Really, really am.
And I'll just do a quick bit. So what Shaina is mentioning, right? For speaking about choices, right? Her parents made the choice to lie about their address to get into a better school because it give her a better outcome, right? In education and life. A lot of folks go to jail for that, unfortunately, right? So talk about choices. A lot of folks go to jail for the choice of trying to get their kids to a better funded elementary school, right? So it's a choice, but it's also a choice that comes with a lot of consequence, right? So awesome.
Okay, awesome. Yes, we have 2 minutes left, and there's a little bit left, but we're gonna try to get through this. But basically, what we wanted to talk about was that harm is always gonna happen. Harm happens within our friend groups, within our family situations. We hurt each other. That's always gonna happen. To think that we're going to create a world where hurt doesn't happen is like literally impossible. But there's a difference in the resources that we can access when the harm does happen. And so when they're in a well-funded community, there are networks in place that will help those in need and prevent that harm from even happening in the first place. Let's say someone needed to have food they did not eat today. In a well-funded community, there would be resources available to make sure that person got something to eat that day without having to go steal it from someone else. But in a underfunded community, people are often left without support or enough resources to actually get the help that they need. And so they're forced to fix the problem on their own, which sometimes ends with someone else getting hurt. Bringing in what, I wish I got your name. Person in the white turn, there is really awesome resources being given within underfunded communities that is within the community. I feel way safer in a community that is predominantly Black and brown just because that's I don't know, that's my community. I feel safer. I know that they have my back when I need it. But that doesn't eliminate the fact that we don't have the resources to address it, like, at the root. Like, we can, like, talk about it. We can go into, I don't know, we can have community, and community really gets us out of a lot of things. But in underfunded communities, we do not have the resources to really get into it all the way. And so this is probably be the last activity that we do just because of time. But we can come to you with a scenario. There's a student who keeps on coming to class late and keeps on falling asleep in class. And today they started a fight. If we had an infinite amount of resources, how would we deal with the problem? And so we can leave you like with a minute just to think about what we can do for this child. And then maybe also think about what would usually happen to this child within, like, the current situation. So give y'all a minute to sit with that, and I'll give the mic to the first person that raised their hand.
I personally feel like problems like these start at home. So going to a situation like this, I would like to home that situation, make sure that both parents at home or make sure the parents have access to food on the table, so not go to school and just kind of be there for the child. If they're constantly falling asleep, I feel like they will have they don't have stability, get a good night's rest. Like, probably live in a area which is prone to violence and just under what people are talking.
They might say that they don't have resources. But at the end of the day, they're not making sure that it's not being mindful. They have to feel safe at home and have to my old school did not have resources. They have those resources and they could.
Thank you. We have someone here.
So I work with kids, and I think it's really important to, as a caregiver, as a teacher, as a counselor, anyone who has direct contact and can make a difference in kids' lives, whether you realize it or not, is to really make sure that you're patient and that you understand that this isn't something that they can control, and also like not label them as like a problem kid to say. Like, I feel like so many times in school, this has happened because it's like not the norm, and it's into the classroom and teachers just assume that these kids like have something wrong with them, they're bad listeners, whatever the box they put them in, like whatever that box is, they just put a label on them, and then that in turn affects how the teachers perceive them, and that can affect like their grades, their opportunities they're given by the teachers, and that just kind of sets them up for more failure. So if I have an infinite amount of resources, I would definitely make sure that teachers and anyone in schools are given like trauma-informed teaching and make sure that they know.
Oh, thank you for that. Receive that.
Just referring to like the activity number 2, if I have an infinite amount of resources, how would I deal with this problem? You would just have to really, you have to start at the root of the issue. They're coming to class late, they're consistently falling asleep. You have to think, well, what is their transportation to even get to school, and why are they so tired?
Yep.
You have to like, I would make sure that there's like free transportation to and from like all the locations to the school, like a free bus or like bikes that you could use. And then if they're consistently falling asleep, you have to think like, if they're falling asleep, they're so tired, they're probably up late. Why are they up late? Like, maybe their internet is really bad because like they can't afford good internet, so like they're doing homework for hours and hours, and just like I would want to provide like better internet, better transportation, better like resources to get this stuff done. Maybe like after school programs where they can work on stuff that they aren't able to work on at home because they don't even have like computers, stuff like that.
I think the root of the issue, first line of defense for minors in the states at least, is the teachers that where they go to school, and then also the social work system in those areas. And unfortunately, the complex network in the US it's not good. It's problematic, and there's a million kids and like social workers for them to take care of. And so if you have a caseload that's telling them the best, one kid is really, unfortunately, it's not always like, you don't always get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can call like child protective services, you can call social workers, but that doesn't mean a lot of people does, because finding a placement in foster home, if it is a home problem, is so now difficult because not all, most of foster homes aren't great. It's just kind of like a cycle, and unless funds are like reallocated to be connected to that system, students are going to have to learn how to specialize with their needs to protect not only school but at home, and that's what that.
But also a part of the bigger issue is the fact that we had to wait until they got into a fight with somebody for it to like be an issue. The problem could have started when they were coming like to class and they're going to class. And that is something that most people don't realize and don't even talk about, but the bigger issue is that it has to get to a point where it's harder to fix rather than like getting to the root of the issue.
Okay, I appreciate that. We don't have much time. I know there's so many folks in the audience who want to offer something, and I want to hear all of you. But I do think what's important for us to really speak about is like this idea of when this person might have received resources. Like you said, usually they receive resources in the space where they start a fight, right? And the resource that they receive is probably a police officer, right? A school safety agent. And this idea that we heard going back and forth about, the school department pipeline. We see that over and over. There are more police officers in schools than there are counselors, right? So there's some money there, but the money is being allocated in ways that are not necessarily helpful to the school community, right? So we see that. We have like 3 minutes. What I really want to do is, give you guys an opportunity to ask a question, and this one about resources. If you guys have any suggestions, we are going to be at the panel today. If you can stick around, we would love that. We're going to get more in depth about what we're doing to provide resources, what young folks and even your school community can do. The first master class, we had so many young people who wanted to start a chapter here, and we are here to help you guys do that. So whatever it is that you want to do to make sure that we have a more equitable, place to live, we're definitely here to do that. Anyone have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, where is the panel?
Okay, so the panel will be at 5 o'clock. So we also have an opportunity for you to learn some more about what's happening. We have with us today members of IRISE, which is the Interdisciplinary Research Institute for the Studies of Inequalities, which is located here at TU. They're right outside the door. Also with us are some people from the DU Media Group, which is all about telling stories. So if you're interested in learning more about telling the stories that are untold, changing the narratives, creating counter narratives, that's what they're all about with DU Media. And also, as I mentioned, Colorado March for Our Lives is here as well. So we're inviting you at the end of this, if you could leave through the wood doors there on the inside, and we're lucky that you actually were here throughout the whole rainstorm, so now we think it's over. So I think it's dry out, but you're welcome to walk through the doors, pick up some information. And so before you go though, I just want to make sure that we give an opportunity to thank our guests for a wonderful